Hi, today we're going to be learning about doing calculations with decimal fractions. This is the section that you should already know how to do. I'm just going to briefly remind you about the different kinds of calculations that we do with decimal fractions and how we do them, and then we're going to put it all together doing mixed operations with decimal fractions. So let's start off by looking at adding and subtracting decimal fractions. We add and subtract decimal fractions vertically by writing the numbers under each other with the decimal points in the same column, so we make sure that they're all lined up properly. Then once you've written the fractions position correctly, you can add or subtract them in the same way that you would with normal whole numbers. If necessary, you can fill in extra zeros to help you along the way. Okay, so let's have a look at an example. In this example, we have to add the numbers 423.79 and 46.813. Okay, so let's go and see how we would do this question. Okay, so here's the question. So we're going to start off by writing these numbers underneath each other, lined up so that the decimal points are in the same column. So I'm going to have I'm just going to do my calculation on the side over here. This is my rough work, and I'm just going to write the answer over here. So the rough work is going to look like this. So I have 423.79, and I'm adding 46.813. So I make sure that I've got it written so that the commas are underneath each other, or the decimal points are underneath each other. And now I'm going to go and add it. So I've got nothing plus 3 is 3, 9 plus 1 is 10, 1 plus 7 plus 8 is 16. Then I've got my comma over here. 1 plus 3 plus 6 is 10. 1 plus 2 plus 4 is 7, and 4. So I've got 470.603. So that's what you get for that answer over there. Okay, so I'm just doing my calculations over here on the side, and then I write down my answer over here and in line with the question. Okay, so now let's go on to the next one. We're going to take the same numbers, but now we're going to be subtracting them instead. So we still have 423.79 and 46.813, but now we're finding the difference between those two numbers. Okay, so let's go and see how we would do this question as well. So for this one, I'm going to do the exact same thing of doing my calculations on the side of here. So I've got 423.79 minus 46.813. So it looks pretty much the same as when I was doing the one over here, except now I've got a minus instead of a plus. But now when I subtract, I have a bit of a problem over here because I'm going to be subtracting 3 from nothing. So I'm going to put a 0 in here. So this is what I was meaning when I said, if necessary, you can add in extra zeros. So over here, I'm putting in a 0, so I've got something there, okay? Because now I need to subtract 3. I can't subtract 3 from 0, though. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to borrow from the 9. That becomes 8, and I put my 1 over there, making 10. So 10 minus 3 is 7. 8 minus 1 is 7. I can't subtract this, so I'm going to borrow again. So that's 2 over there, and this becomes 17 minus 8 is 9. Then I have my comma over there. I can't do this, so I borrow again. That's changes to a 1, and I have 12 minus 6 giving me 6. Then I need to borrow one more time, 3, and that becomes 11 minus 4 is 7, and then I've got 3 over there. So this gives me 376.977. So that's how you would do that question. So when you're doing adding and subtracting of decimal fractions, you make sure that you write them underneath each other so the decimal points are lined up properly, and then you just add and subtract in the same way that you normally would with normal numbers, just making sure that you do bring down that comma as well. So you write that down as well. Okay, now let's go on to multiplying decimal fractions. We multiply the numbers. When we multiply decimal fractions, we multiply the numbers ignoring the decimal points and extra zeros, okay? And then we determine where the decimal point needs to go by counting the number of decimal places that there were in each of the original numbers that we were multiplying together and adding the number of decimal points that there were all together. And the answer, or the product, is going to have the total number of decimal places that you had all together in the things that you were multiplying together. Okay, so let's have a look at an example where we're going to be doing this. Okay, so in this example, we've got 0.0367 multiplied by 0.28. So let's see how we would do this question. Okay, so we start off by taking that, and we are going to be multiplying the numbers together, ignoring all the zeros and the decimal points. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to take just the 367. I'm also going to be doing my calculations on the side of here. So 367, and I'm multiplying that by 28. Okay, so this is what I'm going to have for the the actual multiplication part of this. So now I'm going to work this out. So 8 times 7 is 56. 8 times 6 is 48, plus 3 is 53. 8 plus 5 is 53. 8 times 3 is 24, plus 5 is 29. Okay, then I've got 20, so I need to be putting a 0 over there. So now 2 times 4 is 14. 2 times 6 is 12, plus 1 is 13. 2 times 3 is 6, plus 1 is 7. Okay, so let's go and add that all up. So I get 6 and 7 and 12 and 10. So you end up with 10,276. But now obviously 0.0367 multiplied by 0.28 is not 10,276. So now we've got what we end up with when we multiply the numbers together, ignoring the decimals and the zeros. But now we have to go and work out where the decimal point needs to be. So I look and see how many decimal points I have, or how many decimal places I have rather, all together in the numbers that I was multiplying together. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 in that number, and I've got 2 in this number. So altogether there are 6 decimal places. So now I need to make sure that my answer has got 6 decimal places. This over here is 5 digits, so I'm going to need 1 extra decimal place. These are all going to be decimal places, and I need 1 extra, and that extra one is going to be made up with a 0 that goes in the front after the comma. So I'm going to have, my answer is going to be, with my comma over here, 6 decimal places. So I start with a 0, and then I have these digits over here, 1, 0, 2, 7, 6, and I obviously have to have something in front of my comma, so it's going to be a 0 over there. Okay, so I need to make sure that I've got 6 decimal places because I had 6 altogether over there. Okay, so that's how you do multiplication with decimal fractions. Right, now let's go on to dividing decimal fractions. When we divide decimal fractions, we start off by multiplying the dividend, which is the number being divided, and the divisor, which is the number that you're dividing by, both by a power of 10, so that the divisor is a whole number. We want to end up dividing by a whole number, and in order to do that, we need to multiply both of the numbers by the same power of 10, so that we end up dividing by a whole number. Okay, once you have done that, once you've multiplied both numbers by the same power of 10, you then go and work out the division using long or short division as normal. Okay, so let's have a look at an example. In this example over here, we've got 62.5 that we are dividing by 0.04. So let's go and see how we would do this question. Okay, so we're going to take this question, 62.5 divided by 0.04, and I need to make sure that I'm dividing by a whole number. So to do that, I'm going to multiply both of these by the same power of 10 that will make the one I'm dividing by, my divisor, a whole number. Okay, so I'm going to multiply, in order to make this a whole number, I need to multiply it by 100 so that I can move my decimal point 2 places. That means that I need to do the exact same thing to this one. So when I'm doing my calculation over here, my working out on the side, I'm going to take 4, I'm going to be dividing by 4, because if I move this 2 places, that becomes 4, and I'm dividing that into, now if I move this one 2 places, it's going to become 1, 2, I'm going to have an extra 0 over here, so it's going to become 6,250. So now I'm going to be dividing 6,250 by 4, which is the same as dividing 62.5 by 0.04, because I multiplied both of them by the same power of 10. I multiplied both of them by 100. Okay, so now let's go and work this out. So 4 goes into 6 once with a remainder of 2. 4 goes into 22 5 times with a remainder of 2. 4 goes into 25 6 times with a remainder of 1. 4 goes into 10 twice. And now we still have a remainder. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a decimal point over here, because that is where the decimal point is. We just aren't showing it if there's nothing after it, but now we are going to have something after it. So I'm going to put my comma over there, and I'm going to put an extra 0 in. And now I'm going to be able to put my remainder down. So I've got a remainder of 2 that goes over there, and then 4 goes into 20 5 times with no remainder, and I must put my comma there as well. So now when I divide 6,250 by 4, I end up with 1,562.5. So that's what you should get for that question. And that's how you divide decimal fractions. Okay, now let's go on to squares and cubes of decimal fractions. Okay, so now for squares and cubes of decimal fractions, we're going to be using a concept that we already dealt with in multiplying decimal fractions, okay? And that is that when you're multiplying decimal fractions, your product will have the same total number of decimal places as they were altogether in the numbers that you were multiplying. Okay, so now remember, squaring and cubing is actually just multiplication. It's just you multiplying the same number by itself. Okay, so when we square and cube decimal fractions, you need to remember that you raise the number to the power, ignoring the decimal points and the extra zeros, just like when we were doing multiplication. And then once you've done that, you find out where the decimal point must be by multiplying the number of decimal places that you started with by the exponent. So if you are squaring, you're going to multiply the number of decimal places by 2. If you are cubing, you're going to multiply the number of decimal places by 3. And you can also apply the same rule for other exponents as well, that you multiply the number of decimal places by whatever exponent it is. Okay, now let's go and have a look at an example. In this example, we've got 0.05 and we need to cube it. Okay, so let's see how we do this question. Okay, so here I've got my question, 0.05 cubed. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the 5, I'm ignoring the zeros, the extra zeros and the comma. I'm going to take just the 5 and I'm going to cube that. So 5 cubed is 125. Okay, now I need to work out where my decimal point needs to go. So what I'm going to do is I look at the number I started with and I see how many decimal places there were. There were 2 decimal places, and I'm going to take the number of decimal places and multiply by the exponent, which is 3 over here. So it's 2 decimal places multiplied by 3, that gives me 6. So that means that my answer, or my cube of 0.05 needs to have 6 decimal places. So I'm going to take over here the 125 that I got, which has 3 digits, and I need to add zeros so that I have 6 digits altogether after my decimal comma. Okay, because this isn't enough, I know that I'm going to be starting with a 0 first before my decimal point, and then I'm going to be filling in the extra spaces with zeros before I put in these. So because I've only got 3 digits and I need 3 more still to make up the 6, I'm going to have 3 zeros and then my 125 over there. So 0.03 or 0.05 cubed is 0.000125, making sure that I've got 6 decimal places after my comma. Okay, now let's go on to finding the square and cube roots of decimal fractions. Okay, so now this is going to be a very similar concept to what we were doing for squaring and cubing. We're just going to be doing it the other way around. Okay, so we're going to start off by finding the root of the number, ignoring the decimal points and extra zeros. So just like we did for squaring and cubing, but now we're finding the root and not the square of the cube, okay? But we're also ignoring decimal points and extra zeros. And then we're also going to find out where the decimal point needs to go by working out how many decimal places there need to be in the answer. And to do that, we're going to take the original number of decimal places that there were, that we started with, and divide it by the root index. So if you're taking the square root, then the root index is a 2. You can't see it, but you must remember there's an imaginary or invisible little 2 outside the square root sign. So you're going to be dividing the number of decimal places by 2 if you're finding the square root. If you're finding the cube root, you're going to be dividing by 3. Okay, so let's go and have a look at an example. In this example, we've got the square root of 1,44 that we need to find. So let's go and have a look at how we do this question. Okay, so in this one, I've got the square root of 1,44. So just like I did over here, I'm going to ignore my comma, or if there were any zeros, extra zeros as well, I'll ignore those too. And I look at the number as a whole. And this, if I ignore the comma, this is the number 144. So I'm going to be finding the square root of 144. Now the square root of 144 is 12. Okay, so now I need to work out where my decimal point needs to go. So I look at my original number and I see how many decimal places were there to start with. There are 2 decimal places. Okay, there are 2 digits after the decimal point. So now what I need to do is take the 2 decimal places and divide it by the root index. Now remember I said if you can't see a little number outside, then it's a 2. So there's an imaginary or invisible little 2 over there. That is what I'm going to divide by. So there are 2 places that I'm dividing by 2, which means that I'm going to have 1 decimal place in my answer. So the square root of 1,44, if I have one decimal place over here, it's going to be the 2, and so the comma needs to go in front of the 2. So it's going to be 1,2. Okay, so that's what you should get for the square root of 1,44. Okay, so now that we've done all those different kinds of calculations that we can do with decimal fractions, now we're going to be putting it all together in mixed operations with decimal fractions. Now for mixed operations, you need to remember to use BEDMAS to help you to remember the correct order of operations. So remember, BEDMAS stands for brackets for the B, the E is exponents, then D and M are division and multiplication that go together, and then A and S are addition and subtraction that go together. Okay, so we're going to be using BEDMAS to help us to remember the correct order of operations for doing calculations with mixed operations with decimal fractions, just like we do with any other kinds of calculations that have mixed operations. Okay, so let's have a look at an example. In this example, we've got in brackets 0.03 multiplied by 0.8, then minus 0.02, then we close the brackets and that's all squared, and then we divide it all by 0.02. Okay, so let's have a look at how we would do this question. So over here I've got the question written down, and we need to just take a look at everything we're going to have to do here. So if you look at it, you'll see that there is only one term. So I'm not going to have multiple things happening in multiple terms at the same time. I'm only going to have to worry about things, what order to do the things in just this one term that I've got over here. Okay, in this term, I've got brackets. Inside the brackets, I've got multiplication and subtraction. Remember, multiplication has to happen before the subtraction, and only then can I do the squaring. Brackets comes before exponents, so I cannot do the squaring until I've simplified what's inside the brackets. Once I've done that, I'm going to then square it, and then I can only do my division over here. Okay, so let's have a look at the first step, which is the multiplication inside the brackets. Okay, so now remember what we learned about multiplying decimal fractions. When we multiply decimal fractions, we ignore the decimal points and the extra zeros. So I'm going to have 3 times 8. That's what I'm working with here. So 3 times 8, I know, is 24. So 3 times 8 is 24. Okay, so now I need to find out where my decimal point is going to be, because it's not just 3 times 8, it's 0.03 times 0.8. So if I look over here, I've got 1, 2, and then over here I've got 1 as well. So there are 3 decimal places altogether in what I am multiplying over here. Ignoring everything else, just what I'm multiplying over here, there are 3 decimal places altogether. That means that this needs to have 3 decimal places. At the moment I've got 2 digits, so that's going to be 2 decimal places. I need to have an extra 0 to fill in my extra decimal place, and then I'm going to be starting with a 0 in front of the comma as well. So I'm going to have over here in the brackets 0, comma, and then 0, 2, 4, making my 3 decimal places where I have 0.03 multiplied by 0.8. Okay, then I have minus 0,02 squared divided by 0,02. Okay, I can't do anything with those yet, so that just stays as it is until I get to the next step. Now the next step is going to be this subtraction that I need to simplify inside the brackets. Remember, I can't do the squaring until I have completely simplified what's inside these brackets over here. So I'm going to do the subtraction. I've got 0.024, and I'm subtracting 0.02, so 0,02, and when I subtract that, it's 4 minus nothing is 4, 2 minus 2 is 0, 0 minus 0 is 0, comma, 0 minus 0 is 0. So I end up with 0,004. So that is what you should get when you subtract this over here. So inside the brackets, I end up with 0,004. And that still needs to be squared, and then I need to divide by 0,02. Okay, so now I've done the second step. Now the third step is going to be doing my squaring over here. So now remember, when we square, what we're going to do is we are going to take just the number, ignoring all the decimal and all the zeros, just the number, which is 4, and I'm going to square that. So that's going to be 4 squared, which is 16. But now I have to make sure that I've got the right number of decimal places, and my decimal point is in the right place. So if I look over here, I've got 1, 2, 3 decimal places. So what I need to do is take the 3 decimal places and multiply it by the exponent, which is a 2. So it's 3 times 2. That gives me 6 decimal places altogether. So my answer for this over here needs to be something with 6 decimal places. Over here, I've got 2 digits. So that's going to be 2 decimal places. So I need to fill in the rest of the decimal places with zeros. So it's going to be 0, comma, and then 1, 2, 3, 4 zeros, and then the 1 and the 6 to make 6 decimal places altogether. And then I'm going to divide that by 2, 0, comma, 0, 2. Right. Now that I've done that, I can go on to my last step, which is my division. Now, in order to do my division, I need to make sure that I'm dividing by a whole number. And to do that, I need to multiply by a power of 10 that will make this number a whole number. So I want to move this decimal point 2 places to the right. So that means I'm multiplying by 100. But that means I have to do the same thing with this one over here. 1, 2. I have to do whatever I do to that, I have to do to this as well. So I'm multiplying this by 100 as well, which means my comma is going to be over here. So what I'm actually going to be doing is I'm going to be dividing 2 into, the comma is now over here. So I'm going to not worry about these other extra zeros in front anymore. I've just got 0, comma, 0016. Okay, and now we're going to go and divide 2 into that. So now over here, 2 doesn't go into 0, so I have a 0 up there. Comma, and then 2 still doesn't go into 0, so I've got another 0. 2 still doesn't go in, so I've got another 0. 2 doesn't go into 1, so I have another 0, but I have a remainder of 1. And then 2 goes into 16 8 times. So I end up with 0, comma, 0008. And we are now done with that question. Now you're going to do some for yourself. Here's the first one you're going to do. You've got 0,6 multiplied by, in brackets, 8.3 minus, then in brackets inside those brackets, 4.5 plus 3.75. Okay, so I'm going to give you 3 minutes to work on this question. Okay, let's go through that question quickly. So over here, I've got the question 0.6 multiplied by in brackets 8.3 minus inside brackets 4.5 plus 3.75, and then the brackets are all closed. Now, the first thing you have to do when you have question with brackets inside brackets is you have to remember that you must do whatever's on the inside first. Okay, so I need to do the innermost brackets first. So over here, I have to first simplify the 4.5 plus the 3.75. That is my first job. Then the next step is going to be to simplify the 8.3 minus whatever I get from that. Okay, so I'm going to start off by simplifying the 4.5 minus, or 4.5 plus 3.75. So over here, 4.5 plus 3.75. Okay, so if I simplify that, I've got nothing plus 5 is 5. Then 5 plus 7 is 12, comma, and then 1 plus 4 plus 3 is 8. Okay, so that gives me 8.25. So over here you should have got 0.6 times, in brackets, 8.3, and then in place of these brackets, I'm now going to have 8.25. So minus 8.25. So now I need to simplify the subtraction over here. Okay, so now I'm going to go over here and say 8.3 minus 8.25. Okay, so now remember, if you're subtracting and you don't have anything over here, you can put in an extra 0, and then we can go and do our subtraction. So I need to borrow from this 2 over here, or this 3 over here, making it 2, and that becomes 10. So 10 minus 5 is 5, then 2 minus 2 is 0, and then there's my comma, 8 minus 8 is 0. So I end up with 0.05. Okay, so that means that these brackets over here are going to become 0.05. So now I've got 0.6 multiplied by 0.05. Now I'm going to go and simplify that multiplication. So to work out the multiplication, I'm taking 6, ignoring the 0 comma, and over here ignoring the zeros in the comma. So I have 6 times 5. Okay, so over here, 6 times 5 I know is 30. Okay, but now I need to have 1, 2, 3 decimal places because I'm starting with 3 decimal places altogether. So now this is 2 digits. So I need to have an extra 0 that's going to go in front to make 3 digits for my 3 decimal places. So I'm going to have 0 and then comma, and then my first 0 that goes in front, and then my 3. But now this last 0 over here is going to be just a 0 and then there's nothing else after it. I don't need to write that last 0. So it's just 0.03. If your last digit or digits is or are zeros, then you don't need to write them if it's after a decimal point. Okay, so for question A, you should have ended up with 0.03. Right, now let's go on to question B. For question B, you've got in brackets the square root of 0.16, then plus 0.5, and then close the brackets. Now you're multiplying by 0.003. Okay, so I'm going to give you 2 minutes for this question. Okay, so let's go through that question. So now the first thing I have to do is work out the square root of 0.16 because a root is part of the same step as exponent. So exponent goes before addition. So I need to do the square root over here. Now remember, when we're finding the square root of a decimal fraction, we're going to ignore the 0 and the comma. We're just going to look at the 16. So we're going to be finding the square root of 16, which you should know is 4. So the square root of 16 is 4. And then we need to work out where our decimal point is and how many decimal places we should have. So over here, I've got 1, 2 decimal places. So I need to be dividing the number of decimal places I have that I started with by the root index. So that's over here is an imaginary or invisible little 2. I'm dividing 2 decimal places by 2, which gives me 1 decimal place. So my square root of 0.16 needs to have 1 decimal place. Okay, now over here, this is only 1 digit, so it's going to be the only decimal place. So I've got over here, in brackets, 0, 4. Then I've got plus 0, 5, close the brackets, times 0,003. Okay, so now we're going to work out the 0.4 plus 0.5. Okay, so over here, 0,4 plus 0,5. You may well have been able to just do this in your head. Because they're in the same position as each other, you can just add them. 4 plus 5 is 9, and it's going to stay 0,9. Okay, so we're going to have over here 0,9 multiplied by 0,003. Now I need to work out 0.9 multiplied by 0.003 by first multiplying together my 9 and my 3. So over here I'm going to have 9 times 3, which you should know is equal to 27. So now I need to see how many decimal places we're supposed to have. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4. So I need to have 4 decimal places in my product, which means that over here, if I've got 2 digits in 9 times 3, that's 27, that's 2 digits, I need to have 2 more digits still. So that's going to be 2 zeros adding to the 27 to give me my 4 digits for my 4 decimal places. So I'm going to have 0, then 2 zeros, and then 2, 7. So that we should have got for question B. Right, now let's go on to question C. In question C, we've got in brackets 1.1 squared plus 3 times 1.2, and then we're subtracting in new brackets 0.84 divided by 0.2 minus 1.45. Okay, so I'm going to give you 4 minutes for this question. Okay, so let's go through that question. So over here, I have got in brackets 1.1 squared plus 3 times 1.2, and then minus, and then in a new bracket, 0.84 divided by 0.2 minus 1.45. Okay, so first of all, I have got two terms in this question. Okay, so my two terms are this set of brackets, and then the minus and this set of brackets is my second term. But in this particular example, inside these brackets, I've also got multiple terms. So over here, the 1.1 squared is one term, and then the plus 3 times 1.2 squared is a second term inside the brackets. Now I can do that and I can do that on the same line of calculations because they are separate terms inside those brackets. And then I can also do this over here at the same time as well because it is also in another term over there. Okay, so now I'm going to go and start off with this 1.1 squared. Okay, so I start off 1.1, if I ignore that comma, is 11 squared. So I'm working out over here 11 squared for this first thing. So 11 squared is 121. Okay, so now I need to work out where my decimal point is going to be. If I look over here in what I started with 1 decimal place. So if I multiply 1 decimal place by the exponent, which is 2, that means I'm supposed to have 2 decimal places in the square. Okay, so 1.1 squared, if I have 2 decimal places, the last 2 digits are going to be my decimal places. So the comma is going to be before that 2 over there. So it's going to be 1,21. Then I'm going to do this over here. So now I've got a positive times a positive is plus. So still in brackets over here. So 1.21 plus. Now I've got 3 times 1.2. So remember, we're going to ignore the comma and any extra zeros, which there aren't any in here. And we're going to multiply what we've got here. So this is 3 times 12. So now you should know that 3 times 12 is 36. Okay. So if I get 36 when I multiply those together, now I can find out where the comma is supposed to be by looking at how many decimal places I started with. I started over here with 1 decimal place, and there weren't any in the 3. So that means that I need to have 1 decimal place in my product. So only the 6 is going to be a decimal place. The comma is going to go in front of the 6. So it's going to be 3,6. So I've got 1,21 plus 3.6. Close those brackets. Now I'm done with this set of brackets over here. Now I'm going to go minus, and I'm going to start on this set of brackets. So over here, I've got 0.84 divided by 0.2. Okay, so now for division, remember, we're going to multiply both of them by a power of 10 so that we are dividing by a whole number. So I want to move this decimal point 1 place to the right so that I am working with a whole number. That means I need to do the same thing over here. So when I'm dividing this, I'll be working with dividing by 2. So it's going to be 2 divided into, if I move this comma 1 place to the right, it's going to be 8,4. So I'm dividing 8,4 by 2. So 2 goes into 8 4 times, then I've got my comma, and then 2 goes into 4 twice. So I end up with 4,2. So 8,4 divided by 2 is 4.2. So 0.84 divided by 0.2 is 4.2. And then I can't do anything with this 1.45 at the moment. So it's minus 1,45. Okay, so now there was quite a lot of stuff that I was doing for this first line over here. I simplified my exponent over there, I simplified that multiplication, and I simplified that division because none of them were interfering with each other because they were all separate terms. Here, these were separate terms within the brackets, and this was in the other set of brackets, so it's also a separate term. Okay, now we're going to go on to the next step where we're going to be simplifying the addition in this set of brackets and the subtraction in that set of brackets. So first let's have a look at this addition. So I've got 1.21 plus 3.6. So over here I'll work out 1,21 plus 3,6, and I'm going to add those. So I've got 1 plus nothing is 1, 2 plus 6 is 8, 1 plus 3 is 4. So that gives me 4.81. Okay, so over here I get 4,81 minus 4.2, and that I'm subtracting 1.45. So now I'm going to have over here 4.2 minus 1,45. Now if I work this out, I have to put a 0 over here because I'm going to need to borrow. So this becomes a 1 and it becomes 10. So 10 minus 5 is 5. I need to borrow again. That becomes a 3. This becomes 11. So 11 minus 4 is 7. There's my comma. And 3 minus 1 is 2. So I end up with 2,75. So I'm subtracting 2,75. Okay, so now 4.81 minus 2,75. This is the last thing that I have to now work out for this particular calculation. So now I have to subtract that. 4.81 minus 2.75. Let's go and work that out. So over here, I'll do this. 4,81 minus 2,75. I can't subtract 5 from 1, so I'm going to borrow over there the 7. That, or the 8 changes to 7, that becomes 11 over there. So 11 minus 5 is 6. 7 minus 7 is 0. That's comma, and then 4 minus 2 is 2. So I end up with 2,06, and that's what you should have got for question C. Okay, and now we're going to go on to the last question for today. Question D is 0,01 multiplied by, in brackets, 0.5 minus 2.5 times 0.12, and that is all being cubed in those brackets. Okay, so I'm going to give you 3 minutes for this question. Okay, so let's go through that last question. So here we're going to start off. In this one, there's only one main term, okay? But inside the brackets over here, I've got multiplication and then I've got subtraction. Then I also need to do my exponent, but I can only do that exponent once I've simplified what's inside the brackets. And then I'm going to multiply by the 0.01. Okay, so I'm going to start off with the multiplication inside the brackets over here. Okay, so everything else is going to stay as it is for now. So I've got 0, 0, 1, that's not changing, times in brackets 0, 5 isn't changing yet. Then I'm going to have a negative times a positive is negative. And now I have to work out 25 times 12. Okay, so let's go and work that out quickly. So 25 times 12, 2 times 5 is 10, 2 times 2 is 4, plus 1 is 5, so that's 50. Then I have 10, so I need to be putting a 0 over here. Then 1 times 5 is 5, 1 times 2 is 2, so that gives me 0, 10, and 3. So that all gives me 300. So 25 times 12 is 300, but now I need to work out where my decimal comma is going to go. So over here I've got 1, 2, 3 decimal places in what I was multiplying together there. I'm not worried about anything else. I'm just looking at the two numbers that I was multiplying together and how many decimal places they have. I've got 3 decimal places there. So I need to have 3 decimal places in my product. So over here, this is 3 digits. So all 3 of those are going to be my decimal places. I don't need to add in any extra zeros. So I'm going to start with my 0 because I don't have more digits over here. So I do need to start with a 0, comma, and then I've got my 3, but now because these last 2 zeros over here are not followed by anything else that's not a 0, I don't need to write them. I can just write 0, 3. Okay, so now that needs to be cubed outside the brackets there. So now I've got 0.01 times in brackets 0.5 minus 0.3. So now I need to go and work out the subtraction over here. So this isn't going to change for now, 0.01 times, and now I have to go and work out what 0.5 minus 0.3 is. Now, like I said earlier, you can work this out in your head. Because they're in the same place value position, the 5 and the 3, we can just subtract them. But let me just show you over here, 0.5 minus 0.3. If I subtract those, 5 minus 3 is 2, so that's going to be 0.2. So now I have over here 0.2, and that I have to cube. Okay, so now we're going to go and work out 0.2 cubed. This is still not changing, so 0.01 stays as it is. Then 0.2 cubed. Now I'm going to ignore the 0 and the comma, and we're just going to cube the 2. So I've got 2 cubed. You should know that is equal to 8. Okay, but now I need to work out how many decimal places we need to have. So over here in my original number, I started with 1 decimal place. I need to multiply the number of decimal places that I started with by the exponent, which is a 3. So if I have 1 decimal place times 3, that gives me 3 decimal places. So my cube needs to have 3 decimal places. So over here, I only have 1 digit. So I need to add in 2 extra zeros to fill in those extra decimal places. So I'm going to start with a 0 and a comma, and then I have 2 zeros and my 8, making altogether 3 decimal places over there. So now I've got 0.01 times 0.008. Okay, so now I need to go and work that out. Okay, so now first of all, 1 times 8 is nice and easy. I don't really need to work anything out for that, but I do need to work out how many decimal places I'm going to have altogether. So 1 times 8 I know is 8. That's simple, okay? It's 1 digit, but over here I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 decimal places. So my product of 0.01 times 0.008 needs to have 5 decimal places. So over here I've only got 1 digit. That means I need to have an extra 4 zeros in front of that 8 after the comma. So I'm going to have over here 0, comma, and then 4 zeros, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then I can only have my 8. And that's what you should have got for question D. And that is how we do mixed operations with decimal fractions. Now that we've learned the concepts in this lesson, it's important to practice, practice, practice. If you haven't already got the worksheet that goes with this video, you can find it by clicking on the link in the description below. The worksheet comes with an extra exercise full of questions for you to work on to master the concepts covered in this lesson. If you found this video helpful, please hit the like button so that others can benefit from it too. Also, be sure to subscribe so that you can easily find my other lessons, and hit the bell so that you will get notified about lessons as I upload them.